For the past 500 years, no empire has collapsed because of bloody wars. All of them fell at different times by rotting at the exact same point, when their own money lost its value. And in today's world, the dollars, which appears unshakable, is moving almost identically toward the same trajectory that brought down the old empires. The truly frightening part is this: collapses never begin on the catastrophic day when the currency finally crashes. Everything actually starts at an invisible moment. A moment no one predicts, when the currency still looks strong, when everything seems normal on the outside, but the internal decay has already begun. Its effects may take years to surface, but the inevitable fall actually starts at the moment when the money still appears powerful. This collapse isn't random. For 500 years, it is repeated in the exact same order, like the law of nature itself. An empire is born, it rises, reaches its peak, wants more, exaggerates its strength at the height of its power, and eventually collapses under the weight of its own currency, failing to manage time, failing to manage excess. Every time in history, the same vicious cycle. Different eras, different nations, different languages, leaders, continents, geographies. But the final scene of destiny is always identical. Let's start with Rome. For 500 years, they had the world's strongest military, the greatest roads, the most advanced cities. And the thing that powered this massive machine wasn't the army, it was the denarius. Pure silver, pure trust, pure power. When a Roman soldier received his pay, he knew exactly what that coin was worth. But Rome's greatest enemy wasn't the barbarians outside. As the empire's borders expanded, costs spiraled out of control. More soldiers, more garrisons, more roads, more administration. As Rome's power grew, its treasury did not grow accordingly. It actually shrank. And Rome made the fatal decision that would seal its fate, reducing the silver content of its money. Instead of pure silver, it began using debased metal. A coin that was once pure silver turned into a silver-coated fake over 2 centuries. Prices increased 50-fold. Soldiers no longer wanted money, they wanted gold. Farmers stopped accepting the denarius. The tax system collapsed, the army collapsed, the state collapsed. Rome destroyed itself from the inside by destroying its own money. The attacks from outside were just the needle popping an already overinflated balloon. It looked like the barbarians brought Rome down, but in truth, Rome was brought down by Rome. In the 1450s, when Portugal found the courage to explore new worlds, the same cycle was born again. When the Ottoman Empire blocked the traditional trade routes, Europe was suffocating, unable to meet its needs. The route Portugal discovered wasn't just exploration, it rewrote the entire global economy. These bold discoveries made real commodities the accepted global currency of trade. But expanding power also meant expanding costs. Across the Atlantic, to strengthen its dominance and build colonial outposts to extract whatever the New World could offer, Portugal built forts along the African coast, bases in the Indian Ocean. And the more Portugal expanded geographically, the more its treasury struggled to support it. No matter how powerful they seemed, that power could not sustain the empire. Instead, it hollowed them out from the inside, because they could not carry the cost of their own expansion. Where Portugal had grown tired and reached the limits of its strength, its closest rival stepped onto the stage: Spain. In 1545, the discovery of Potosi triggered the greatest silver explosion in recorded history. Silver pouring out of a single mountain changed the fate of an entire continent. The wealth a nation would normally accumulate over a century was gained in just a few short years. With their treasuries overflowing with silver, along with the other European kingdoms that did business with them and were paid in silver, Spain appeared to be getting richer. But people and rulers alike failed to notice something crucial. What they overlooked was this: unlimited money does not mean unlimited power. It actually means unlimited inflation. How could a country drowning in silver ever experience inflation. Here's how. The more silver Spain minted, the more shiploads of silver it brought into its treasury, the higher prices rose. Kings declared bankruptcy multiple times. Enormous armadas and vast trade fleets couldn't carry the weight of this financial collapse. An empire collapsed under the very wealth it possessed. Because where money floods the system, inflation rises, and so do prices. The greatest treasure in history turned into one of the greatest financial catastrophes in history. They went bankrupt 4 times, despite possessing more silver than the rest of the world combined. Holland's rise was completely different from Portugal and Spain. This was an entirely different story. They had no vast land. Most of it was below sea level. They had no enormous armies. Instead, they turned these limitations into an advantage. They created what the world desperately needed: a financial system where everyone felt safe. The Bank of Amsterdam built money on a foundation the entire world intuitively trusted: confidence. Modern trade, modern banking, modern stock exchanges. They built the foundation of them all. For a time, the guilder became the symbol of trust across the continent. But a power built on commerce eventually trusted that power too much and entered wars. What they didn't realize was that the cost of war was far beyond what their system could handle. The Fourth Anglo-Dutch War shattered the entire financial structure. Holland collapsed financially long before it fell militarily. Then Britain arrived, the largest empire in history, the empire on which the sun never set. Territory spread across 4 continents, global trade routes, a pound firmly tied to gold. With these strategic, military, and financial networks, they became the backbone of global trade for 2 centuries. But the burden of 2 world wars was too much. Those wars worked like a tunnel draining the lifeblood out of the empire. Debt exploded to 270%. To pay for wartime expenses, even the world's largest gold reserves were drained. As gold melted away, the pound struggled to survive in the markets, but its core was hollow. Britain was defeated not by armies, but by the consequences of its own money. At that point, as the world searched for a new anchor to guide the global economy, the stage was set for Bretton Woods. 44 nations gathered to choose the new safe haven. The pound had lost its shine, and now the dollar, supported by gold and backed by huge reserves, was about to rise. But no one said this out loud. This wasn't just a change of flag or a shift of responsibility. This was simply the next link in a 500-year cycle that had repeated over and over. And everyone who took that flag eventually met the same fate. Portugal fell, then Spain fell, then the Netherlands fell, then Britain fell. Yes, none of these collapses happened through bloody wars or barbarian invasions. Every single one of them was crushed financially, in the same order, for the same reason, under the turning gears of history. And now, the dollar, the next piece of this repeating chain, is following the same pattern. What's even more dangerous is this. For the first time in history, the entire world is tied to this one currency. Earlier, empires collapsed within their own borders. But if this cycle repeats again, it won't just be America that suffers. It will affect everyone, because today's system was built entirely on the dollar. And now one question rises. Why does a currency collapse? How does a collapse begin? These questions take us deep into history's darkest financial breakdowns. Collapse always followed the same 7-step pattern. 1. Uncontrolled territorial expansion. 2. Expenses growing much faster than income. 3. Trying to fund production not with value but with debt, and printing too much money. 4. The natural result of money flooding the system. Rising prices and inflation. 5. Loss of confidence, the thing every system needs to survive. 6. Decline of purchasing power, devaluation, and the currency's collapse. 7. And finally, even the smallest rebellion or war brings the empire down. And the most striking part, The earliest signs of collapse always appear during the strongest moments, and they always start from the inside, never the outside. While the currency still looks strong, it begins losing its value internally. While the empire still looks mighty and functioning, the main pillar holding it up is already rotting. That's why everyone was shocked when Rome fell. That's why everyone thought Spain was still swimming in silver. That's why everyone said, the pound has been strong for centuries, why would it collapse? But history kept giving the same answer. If the money collapses, the empire collapses. And now all eyes turn to one question. If these 7 stages apply to everyone and everything, where is the US today in this model? Is the dollar closer to Rome's denarius, Spain's silver, or Britain's post-war pound? How the dollar rose, and why it's in danger today. The story of the dollar didn't begin with a victory or by conquering someone. It was born from the ashes of a collapse. The world searching for the next actor to take over the role. The decision at Bretton Woods in 1944 wasn't actually a meeting to dethrone the pound. It was the transfer of monetary power from one empire to the next. After 2 devastating world wars, Britain was drowning in debt. Its gold reserves were depleted. The pound was gasping for air just to stay alive. During the wars, everyone had taken a piece of Britain like vultures, tearing apart a carcass. A new actor was needed to take the throne, and right at that moment, the United States stepped onto the stage. The dollar didn't rise overnight, but that night its destiny became clear. It would be the currency sitting at the top. A new order was announced. The world's reserve currency would now be the US dollar. Every nation's currency would be linked to the dollar, and the dollar would be linked to gold. Simple, clear, trustworthy. America had become the world's factory during and after the wars. Whatever the world needed, weapons, steel, oil, technology, America produced the strongest, most advanced version of it. As production and manufacturing increased, the dollar grew stronger and stronger, and the entire global economy began revolving around it. If a country wanted to import something, it needed dollars. International trade was priced in dollars. The world's reserves were filled with dollars. The dollar wasn't just money. It was the backbone of the global system. But history shows us a dangerous pattern, something empires never notice. They begin to crack at the very moment they believe they are strongest. In the 1960s, no matter how powerful the dollar looked, the first crack finally appeared. America was growing, spending, expanding. But its gold reserves were not growing with it. They remained the same. The Vietnam War and massive social spending exposed this crack. For the first time, the United States was stepping into the same trap Rome, Spain, and Britain fell into. The first stage of the 7-step collapse cycle: overexpansion and unsustainable costs. The outside world heard the sound of this crack immediately. And one country didn't just hear it, it decided to use it to its advantage: France. When Charles de Gaulle realized the dollars the US was printing no longer had enough gold backing them, he made one move, a strategic move that would give him leverage. Convert our dollars into gold. This seemingly small step created a domino effect worldwide. Other nations that were already suspicious started doing the same. America was about to lose the game, and at that moment it entered stage 2 of the collapse cycle, expenses rising faster than income. Then in 1971, President Nixon took one of the most radical financial decisions in history. He severed the dollar's link to gold. He did this to break the control other nations were trying to gain over gold and the dollar, and to strengthen America's own hand. Right or wrong, the decision was made. The dollar was no longer backed by anything physical, it was backed only by confidence. This was the modern version of the moment Rome changed the denarius from pure silver to a silver-plated coin. There was no war, no barbarian armies. But the worms that would hollow out the system from within were released. The world quickly adapted to this new order. And not long after, in 1973, when the oil crisis erupted, the U.S. made its second major move, a move that would let it cover its debt with more debt. This marked the beginning of Stage 3, using debt to fill the gap instead of real production. The move was called petrodollar. Under the agreement with Saudi Arabia, oil would be sold only in U.S. dollars. Oil meant energy. Energy meant money, the economy itself. So the dollar replaced gold with oil and found its new anchor. The world had no choice but to use dollars. This was a move made to protect the system and keep America at the top. But it came with long-term consequences that would reveal themselves decades later. By the early 2000s, thanks to the petrodollar, America was at its peak. The dollar was in its strongest era. By the year 2000, 70% of global reserves were in dollars. Anyone holding dollars felt safe. The U.S. could borrow as much as it wanted, print as much as it wanted, expand as much as it wanted. But this was also the moment it unknowingly entered Stage 3 of the collapse cycle. Because something had quietly begun to tighten around its throat. America ignored it. The world needed dollars. Everything seemed fine, but the peak is always the beginning of the decline, just like Portugal, Spain, the Netherlands, Britain. America began walking the same path. Then 4 major breakpoints appeared. Signs that the truck going uphill had reached the top and was now rolling downhill with a burst tire. 1. First sign, the dollar's reserve share began to fall. In 2000, the dollar made up 70% of global reserves. By 2024, it had dropped to 58%. This does not mean the dollar will collapse soon. It means the dollar is no longer the undisputed leader. Empires crack most easily in this period, when leadership continues but superiority fades. Second sign, foreign appetite for U.S. debt disappeared. In 2008, half of U.S. Treasury bonds were held by foreigners. Today that number has fallen to 30%. The world no longer sees U.S. debt as automatically safe. In history, when an empire's currency is no longer widely held abroad, it begins collapsing at home. Third sign, the rise of BRICS. Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa. Yet more countries joined. Egypt, Iran, the UAE, Ethiopia, Indonesia. These nations began asking, why should we use the dollar? And started seeking alternative methods of trade. Even if their influence didn't seem powerful at first glance, dozens of small yet impactful cracks formed over time. Fourth sign, America's internal burden. $36 trillion of debt, 900 military bases at home and abroad, trillion-dollar annual deficits. History has seen this picture 3 times before, in Rome, in Spain, and in Britain. All 3 ended the same way. These signs show that stages 4, 5, and 6 of the collapse cycle have already been crossed, and rapidly. Looking at the 7-stage collapse model makes the picture clear. Only one stage remains: collapse. Of course, this won't happen tomorrow. We won't wake up one morning to find the banks closed and hear the dollar is finished, just like the fall of the pound, just like the unraveling of Rome. Everything starts inside first, as a silent chain reaction. When trust fully disappears, usage declines. The currency may act strong for a while, but it isn't. And then one day, the empty space inside the system becomes visible. A single stone falls, and a domino effect collapses everything. And today, we are exactly in that period. The dollar still appears to be the world's strongest currency, but its throne is shaking. The world now sees that it is no longer obligated to use the dollar. And the day the world stops being obligated, the day a new king is demanded, everything changes. When that day comes, how will the transition unfold for America and the dollar? Gradually, chaotically, or through a completely new system? Today the world is searching for the answer to the same question. The answer lies in three possible endings. History offers three finals. First final: controlled descent, like Britain. In this scenario, the fall doesn't happen overnight. It stretches over years or even decades, just like Britain. The pound lost its reserve currency status, but instead of collapsing, the country slowly descended into a second-tier power. The dollar could follow the same path. Its reserve share would decline, nations would start using alternatives, and the US would remain strong, but no longer the center. In this ending, the world shakes, but the system survives. Second final: chaotic collapse. Like Rome. In this scenario, it's not just a financial crisis, it's a complete systemic breakdown. The disappearance of an empire, just like ancient Rome. The currency weakens from the inside so severely that one day everyone loses trust at the same moment. When trust ends, cash dries up. Markets freeze. Supply chains lock up. Global trade grinds to a halt within days. Oil cannot be priced. Bond markets fail. Reserves lose value. Considering today's interconnected world, such a collapse would not only destroy the US, it would take down the entire planet. Banks, governments, corporations. Everyone would face the same crisis at the same time. This scenario has occurred 4 times in history, but never in a world as interconnected as today. If this path unfolds, it would be Rome's fall on a global scale. Third final: reset and reconstruction, like Bretton Woods. In this scenario, collapse doesn't occur. The system rebuilds itself to avoid collapsing, just like in 1944. The dollar might remain important, but it would no longer be the single leader. A new reserve structure could emerge. A return to a gold-backed framework, for a yuan-centered model. A dual-center system like yin and yang, opposite yet interconnected. Or in the age of AI, a decentralized digital currency system not controlled by any single state. Or something we cannot even foresee today. The world would experience a shock, but it wouldn't collapse. It would reset and rebuild itself. Today, BRICS payment networks, central bank digital currency pilots, and the rapid gold accumulation by China and Russia. All are footsteps of this scenario. If this path unfolds, the dollar won't die, but it will be forced to share the throne. So, which ending will it be? One of these 3 finals will happen, and we are only at the beginning of the final chapter. History never repeats itself exactly, but its rhythm never breaks. What must happen eventually always happens. The dollar has been the reserve currency for roughly 81 years. History tells us the average lifespan of reserve currencies is about 95 years, and today we are precisely within that window. The inevitable cycle, one way or another, will complete. If you liked it or found it helpful, you can subscribe, like, or share. The choice is yours. See you in the next video.